master.
챕터 1. 주어, 동사 찾기.
Unit 1. Higher education in today's challenging global economy must emphasize that practical and liberal education are tightly coupled, and that students' academic, developmental, and experiential lives are entwined.
Integrating everyday parts of your life with what you learn from books and school lessons makes your education richer and more meaningful.
What I love more than anything else when I'm writing articles is knowing that somebody wants to read what I'm writing.
Many talented 20th century writers have been overshadowed by classical writers such as Charles Dickens and William Shakespeare.
To take part equally in discussions or to have the same amount of influence on decisions becomes harder for everyone in larger groups.
To ensure the safety of students who use electric scooters on campus, as well as those around them, officials should look into enforcing stricter regulations, such as giving students a warning when they violate the regulations.
As evolutionary scholar Henry Plotkin says, gaining knowledge of the world across countless generations, organisms conserve knowledge selectively based on evolutionary need, and that collective knowledge is then held within the gene pool of species.
Whether I am a good son or daughter or not depends partly on the way in which I behave to my parents, but partly, and no less importantly, on the relationships I have with my siblings.
Whether companies buy or sell products across national borders, these businesses are all contributing to the volume of international trade that is fueling the global economy.
Whoever wants music instead of noise, joy instead of pleasure, soul instead of gold, creative work instead of business, passion instead of foolery, finds no home in this trivial world of ours.
Unit 2. In an interactive real-time strategy video game set in the 26th century, hundreds of thousands of players spend up to 80 hours a week fighting interspecies battles for dominance and survival.
In a village where the houses are all grouped closely together, 53% of the visiting between families was on a daily basis, whereas in a settlement where the houses are spread out, only 34% of the visiting was on a daily basis.
Every year, millions of young people finish school feeling full of confidence and arrive in the workplace only to find out how much they don't know.
Due to lack of understanding of cultural differences in expression, interpretation of nonverbal behavior may be inaccurate in addition to verbal communication.
In spite of the impressive gains of environmental regulation, new and more subtle sources of pollution and better methods of detection have made us aware of the broad scope of our pollution problems.
With access to a whole range of discounts on numerous facilities, including a sports center, a health center, theaters, and museums, students can save a good amount of money.
During the 18th century, the majority of industries in Europe still relied on wind and water power as well as horse and manpower to drive their small machines.
In the developed world, the widespread use of water-based toilets from the mid-19th century meant that extensive, connected systems of sewage pipes sending the outflow into sewage processing plants were built in cities.
One morning, I was suddenly disturbed by a fire alarm mingled with the shouts and footsteps of people.
Each time you encounter something new, such as a new piece of music or a new language, your brain tries to record as much information as possible, paying closer attention to it.
Unit 3. Seeing only the good in one's own actions and the bad in those of others is a common human weakness, and validating only the positive or negative aspects of the human experience is not productive.
To imagine that the Arab world is a giant desert with cities and villages scattered randomly throughout would be like saying that the United States is made up of country towns run by cowboys.
Making a coin disappear from a glass is a simple but brilliant magic trick that always leaves the audience astounded with surprise and delight.
To have faith in the possibility of love as not only an exceptional individual phenomenon, but also a social phenomenon, is a rational faith based on the insight into the very nature of man.
Reading speed is important, but being able to think straight about what you read is far more valuable.
After a stressful day, relaxing in a comfortable chair, putting on some soothing sounds, and reading something light and entertaining are all good methods to get ready for some restful sleep.
Creating an environment where learning and its natural byproduct, mistakes, are okay can be a potent tool to unite a group and inspire creativity, risk-taking, and effort.
Because humans consider themselves the highest form of life and therefore better than any other animal, showing animals speaking and behaving like humans in movies and books is a useful satirical tool to show human behavior to be more animal-like than we like to admit.
A background check of new employees acquired from acquaintances or coworkers of their previous company, depending on their responsibilities in the job they are filling, is a common practice.
Watching friends struggle before they ask for help may be hard, but it's much better to be patient and make sure that your door is always open.
Unit 4. What are regarded today as irrational activities such as magic, astrology, and alchemy were practiced by people whose scientific credentials leave no doubt as to their rationality. For example, Isaac Newton was one of the most famous alchemists of all time.
Whoever acquires knowledge but does not practice it is as one who plows but does not sow.
What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared with what lies within us.
As someday is a disease that will take your dreams to the grave with you, whatever you consider important to you and you want to do eventually is worth doing, so just do it and correct course along the way.
Whether extraterrestrial life has actually touched the soil of Earth has been a burning question for almost as long as humankind could look at the stars.
The controversy of the presidential election of 1860, one of the most important elections in American history, was associated with slavery. Who would be given the power to change history was in the hands of the voters.
With all things prepared, when construction of the new housing areas begins depends on how soon the company reaches an agreement with local residents.
When an IQ test is scored, how the test taker's score compares to the standard deviation or average scores of all test takers is the main focus.
When evaluating a job opportunity, how much variety there is in the tasks you will perform is just as important as the salary and workload.
The best rocket launch sites tend to be remote, tropical locations. That such places are also often among the world's poorest gives many launches a counterintuitive feel. Billions of dollars in futuristic machinery rising up over rainforests and shanty towns.
챕터 2. 수식어구 뒤에 동사 찾기.
Unit 5. Proponents of the government economic policy argue the policy has played a central role in the country's economic success, when the evidence to support this is thin.
Younger people learning a foreign language typically achieve fluency more easily than older learners, but there are many successful adult learners learning a language through conscious effort.
Triggered by low blood calcium levels, cells called osteoclasts break down bone to release calcium into the blood, potentially causing bone mass reduction.
Organizations built on knowledgeable and committed communities of users often find that good ideas come from the membership base, who will also provide rapid feedback on whether a new service will work.
Anything that contributes to stress during mealtime can interfere with the digestion of food.
When we read advertisements, we usually take it for granted that any comparisons which they make to rival companies are not necessarily fair and square.
Countries where sleep time has declined most dramatically over the past century are also those suffering the greatest increase in rates of physical diseases and mental disorders.
In The Interpretation of Dreams, published in 1900, Sigmund Freud suggested that dreams occur when feelings and ideas unacceptable to the individual threaten to disturb sleep.
The ability to go from one failure to another without losing enthusiasm will bring you success.
The fact that information is conveyed in a high-tech manner somehow adds authority to what is conveyed, when in fact the Internet is a global conveyor of unfiltered, unedited, untreated information.
Unit 6. For many children, their first experiences with print occur in the home. Children from families that make literacy development a focal point of home activities via shared reading are at an advantage.
The beneficial effects of regular exercise or physical activity range from fighting depression to reducing the risk of many chronic diseases such as heart disease and cancer.
The topics that people find amusing and the occasions that are regarded as appropriate for joking can vary enormously from one society to the next.
With the power of hard work and perseverance, one's capacity to fight for what they want to achieve in life from its humble beginning creates their own destiny.
A number of people living in a country where they have to speak a foreign language face social and practical challenges such as the language barrier.
The loss or damage caused by overland flooding, which occurs when bodies of fresh water, such as rivers or dams, overflow onto dry land, is partially covered by insurance companies.
One major difference between people with a low level of self-respect and those with a high level is the type of memories they choose to recall.
People who extract the key ideas from new material, organize them into a mental model, and connect that model to prior knowledge show an advantage in learning complex mastery.
The exact influence of culture will differ from person to person, as no two individuals from the same country, region, religion, socio-economic class, gender, or generation will exhibit the same constellation of cultural behaviors and attitudes.
Places as unique and diverse as the wilds of East Africa's Serengeti, the pyramids of Egypt, and the Great Barrier Reef in Australia make up our world's heritage.
The precision of the lines, the consistency with which symbols are used, the grid and/or projection system, the apparent certainty with which place names are written, and the legend and scale information all give the map an aura of scientific accuracy and objectivity.
Unit 7. Wise men and women in every major culture throughout history have found that the secret to happiness is not in getting more, but in wanting less.
The one benefit of jogging 30 minutes daily that most people are totally unaware of is that people who jog have a better outlook on life and are mentally a lot healthier.
The idea of achieving security through national armament is, at the present state of military technique, a disastrous illusion.
The crucial factor in choosing literary works for foreign language learning is not just to select the appropriate level of language, but to find works that stimulate the reader's involvement.
The skills required for making rational decisions amidst the complexities of free market economies are beyond the abilities of most consumers.
In a natural night sky, someone looking at the heavens with the unaided eye should be able to see nearly 3,500 stars and planets and the glow from the Milky Way, our home galaxy.
One of the most common problems associated with overuse of a computer is eye strain, a common and annoying condition including tired, itching, and burning eyes.
Pine seedlings grown in pots of soil sterilized by humans die within 2 or 3 years of being planted in the ground.
Clothing appropriate for the temperature and environmental conditions in which you will be doing exercise can improve your exercise experience.
In the 1990s, the extension of patent laws as the only intellectual property rights tool into the area of seed varieties started to create a growing market for private seed companies.
Teams working on a collaborative task that are composed of people with different personalities are more productive than teams composed of more similar individuals.
All of the women whom I have interviewed whose mothers worked said that they too would work when they had children.
Unit 8. Considering how I can make the world a better place for another person shows my love for others and pulls me out of myself, lifting my thoughts to a grander place.
Since the human body is basically an extremely complex system of interacting molecules, the technology required to truly understand and repair the body is molecular machine technology.
To improve your reading proficiency, learning to consider the subject of the reading material and make guesses about the context is essential.
Because it would be impossible for you to discover huge stores of historical or scientific evidence firsthand, studying in high school and college, to a great extent, depends on reading books and other documents.
Certain kinds of specialized professionals, such as scientists and engineers working for the federal government, express much less satisfaction with their work than federal executives.
Computers may yield important predictions about complex phenomena, but the predictions they make can never be relied on without experimental confirmation.
A clear understanding of what your purpose is in life leads you to do whatever is necessary to achieve it.
Feelings and judgments about how others feel toward you play a major role in how you choose to solve your day-to-day problems.
Those countries that are most willing to let capitalism quickly destroy inefficient companies so that money can be freed up and directed to more innovative ones will thrive in the era of globalization.
Knowledge gained through workplace experience is far more important than grades earned in school in predicting the job performance of new employees.
Television advertising of products aimed at children under 12 has been outlawed by the Swedish government, and in the United States, 50 psychologists signed a petition calling for a ban on the advertising of children's goods.
챕터 3. 명사 뒤 수식어구로 인한 문제들.
Unit 9. Some experts declare many reasons why all people, young and old, have to do some volunteer work. It can provide a healthy boost to your self-confidence, self-esteem, and life satisfaction.
The scents of plants or fruits can serve various purposes. Lavender can fill you with feelings of tranquility, and peppermint is one of the best scents to improve concentration and memory.
Education and know-how are no longer mere keys to upward social mobility. They are now the sole determinants of whether a person will attain success and financial power.
During the job interview, the interviewer asked the applicant a personal question about their greatest hardship.
The English consider good manners an essential skill to learn in school as well as at home.
We hope that stem cell research and technology will help us to cure or prevent many of the illnesses that kill millions today.
One may wonder if literary fiction is destined to become an old-fashioned genre to be preserved in a museum like an extinct species.
Some cultures maintain an implicit schedule for the right time to do many important things. For example, the right time to start dating, to finish college, to buy your own home, or to have a child.
People with bluebird syndrome are not satisfied with their life and may dream about a splendid future waiting for them, but do not put any effort into trying to create that future.
Certainly, the images of success depicted in the media rarely show the years of struggle and practice that musicians, actors, or athletes engage in before their instant successes.
Unit 10. Just as we consider the people who migrated to the new place active agents of some change, we must also consider the role played by the migration of plants, animals, and germs.
Maximizing the power of positive influence by seeking out people you can respect and admire is a good way to have your dreams, goals, and ambitions come true.
The Knowledge Society represents a radical change because it enables new forms of knowledge, socialization, and new possibilities to store the output of learning across time and space.
Most instructors and learners find active instructional strategies, such as group projects, more engaging, while some find factors such as time pressure obstacles to active learning.
Because of dangerous incidents that resulted from poor communication, the Federal Aviation Administration made assertiveness training for all airline crew members mandatory to ensure they have the ability to communicate effectively.
The public has come to expect the steady increase in the standard of living that new developments in science and technology have brought to continue. But it also distrusts science because it has no clear understanding of science.
Leaders seek a vision for an organization and sell that vision in such a way that the desired goal makes the effort of getting there seem worthwhile.
We let most of the facts and data we face every day pass through our brains with minimal retention or reaction, unless we take special care to retain the information.
Exciting live shows and street performances by various movie characters got the whole crowd in the theme park cheering and wanting for more.
Having too many options can be detrimental to our happiness. Because we can't remove the rejected choices from our minds, we experience the disappointment of having our satisfaction with decisions reduced by all the options we did not choose.
Unit 11. Renaissance artists who promoted the idea of creative genius operated workshops staffed by artist assistants who carried out most of the labor involved in turning their master's design into a work of art.
Researchers have found evidence of long-lasting damage indicating that psychological trauma physically affects the brain.
Since the 1960s, animal rights groups around the world have tried to make people aware of the cruelty affecting animals used for laboratory research.
Much of your email comes from complete strangers who don't know you and who just want to sell you something you probably don't really want.
In ancient Rome, messages sent over short distances, for which a quick reply was expected, were written with a stylus on wax tablets that folded together like a book.
While there are more and more examples of positive practices relying on bioenergy, energy derived from photosynthesizing organisms, that can be brought to larger scale, we have hardly begun to build a sustainable and renewable bio-based economy.
Not all interesting discoveries have an obvious application, which is why there were many innovations that were matched to a product which languished in labs for years.
The one trait of heroes who are truly magnificent that goes beyond all cultural boundaries is the willingness to risk one's life for the good of others.
Researchers who have spent thousands of hours observing the behavior of bottlenose dolphins have discovered that the males form social alliances with one another that are far more sophisticated than any alliance which is seen in animals apart from human beings.
When a counselor's client seeks information regarding the direction he or she should take, like what choice to make or what approach to use, there is ever present a strong temptation on the counselor's part to tell him or her what to do, which is avoided to allow clients to make independent decisions.
Unit 12. Adolescence is considered to be the time teenagers go through biological development and, more importantly, form personal identities.
We often provide lengthy scientific explanations for children's questions, which can be much better answered with a picture that can make them imagine, or a direct experience of something similar.
The government introduced a new system to allow the poor to borrow money they couldn't afford to relieve their financial difficulties and social issues.
We strive towards the day when nations will be judged not by their military or economic strength, nor by the splendor of their capital cities and public buildings, but by the well-being of their children.
Reading is an incredibly complex psycholinguistic activity involving not only phonemic awareness and alphabet recognition, but also comprehension in all its facets, reading between the lines, inferring meaning, and detecting the author's bias.
Anger is the most impotent of passions. It affects nothing it goes about, and hurts the one who is possessed by it more than the one against whom it is directed.
Take time out to do things that you enjoy after work in order to reduce the stress which you experience during your working hours.
Hardly any two words in a language have precisely the same meaning and usage, and we can seldom put a word in place of the one which a great writer has used without making a change for the worse.
I cannot help fearing that men may reach a point where they look on every new theory as a danger, every innovation as a toilsome trouble, every social advance as a first step toward revolution, and that they may absolutely refuse to move at all.
The enemy of learning is knowing, since knowing means you won't see the assumptions that exist behind what you think and know, which means that the thinking process leading to knowing may never be revisited.
In a study of behavior toward genetically modified food, participants actually received the food options they chose to encourage truthful responding.
챕터 4. 문장 구조 파악을 어렵게 하는 것들.
Unit 13. Some readers turn to history for adventure and escape. Others seek the lessons which they believe it will teach.
Believe it or not, the substance that we believe is cleansing us is actually hurting us by polluting our environment.
The information technology explosion has enabled patients to become much more knowledgeable about medical matters than they used to be. So sometimes they form firm views about the treatment that they think is appropriate for their condition.
Not all sources of information are reliable, so you should evaluate all of your sources of information and use only those that you think are dependable.
Many designers working on a project assemble images of the sort of people for whom the product is intended, the surroundings in which they suppose it will be used, and other products that the intended user group might own, seeking to capture the flavor of their lifestyle.
If we value diversity or the unusual for its own sake, we will be forced into valuing things which it seems we do not want to value, randomly creating odd species or unusual, immoral practices only because they are diverse.
A recent study shows that aging does not affect the amount of information that you expect you can absorb in a given period, and once you've learned it, you'll probably retain it as well as a younger person does.
With only few exceptions, my teenagers now love vegetables, which they used to say were disgusting, and so I include them in every meal.
You've probably had science and math classes in school, but not lessons on how to manage your money, which some might say is equally or more important than other subjects in the syllabus.
The simple act of eating, which most of us know is taken for granted, is a daily challenge for children with food allergies because even a small bite of an allergen could have tragic consequences.
Unit 14. Some contact or acquaintance between people is an essential precondition for the formation of a relationship. Evidence from some researchers documents the obvious fact that the less the physical distance, the more likely they are to develop social visiting relationships.
Animal rights activists question whether research with animals is necessary for scientific and medical progress, and if all of the experiments in the animals used are justified and required.
When it is dry, the cactus contracts like an accordion to minimize the surface area exposed to the sun and retain as much water as possible.
In most Western cultures, messages usually concern ideas presented in a logical sequence. The speaker tries to say what is meant through precise wording, and the content of the language is more objective than personal.
One study evaluated the efficacy of a daily multivitamin to prevent cognitive decline among 5,947 elderly males.
Old age occurs the moment you realize there isn't something wonderful about to happen just around the corner.
Now that knowledge matters more than ever, higher education is central to the growth strategy of most countries.
The various religions are like different roads converging on the same point. What difference does it make if we follow different routes, provided we arrive at the same destination?
Our species is so careless and indifferent not only to forego action regarding the obvious environmental threats we face, but to ignore them altogether.
In children, pairing foods with the presence of friends, a liked celebrity, or attention by adults all increases liking for those foods, no doubt reflecting the positive value of each of these groups to the children.
To date, we know of at least 3,700 exoplanets, and there are likely to be trillions of other potentially habitable exoplanets and exomoons in our galaxy and beyond.
Unit 15. Audiences are encouraged by the media to accept their news reports as the last word on any particular topic or event.
To stop being late, all one has to do is change the motivation by deciding that in all circumstances, being on time is going to have first priority over any other consideration.
It is necessary to manifest gratitude to the thousands of doctors and researchers all over the world who, with great generosity and professionalism, dedicate themselves daily, with all their strength, to the service of the suffering and to the curing of illnesses.
Those who love the world learn with great effort the art of obtaining and enjoying what they love.
One way to help keep life's slings and arrows from knocking you off course is to ensure your life is multidimensional, and that way, a setback in any one area won't mean in your mind that you're a complete failure.
Health was for many East Asians, both previously and today, dependent on the balance of forces in the body and the relationships between every part of the body and almost every other part.
Just as inside a living body, the heart, lungs, and bloodstream work constantly to supply oxygen to every living cell, the communication system in an organization supplies its smallest units, the employees, with the most valuable thing, information.
The advocates of the free market economy argue that to be left to itself, unhindered by state intervention, the market will deliver the maximum good to society.
In fact, there is so much salt in the seas of the world that if it were possible to remove the salt and spread it over, for example, the United States, some people believe it would form a layer a mile thick.
When making decisions, make sure to identify your preferences early on. Otherwise, you may feel overwhelmed by choices that in many ways look identical.
As wildfire season raged in California this fall, a startup that with its cutting-edge technology used artificial intelligence to pinpoint the location of blazes there within minutes was in some cases far faster than firefighters would have been.
Unit 16. Two languages being at hand, bilingual citizens have many cultural and occupational advantages.
A composition in narrative style follows a chronological order, with one action following another, just as things happened in the original experience.
With their ability to network and communicate with each other, young people rely on each other's opinions more than marketing messages when making purchase decisions.
Confident about themselves and their abilities, children who have high self-esteem are more likely to fulfill their potential.
Our adventures in space have been a hymn of national purpose for a half-century. The many high notes of success colored with gloomy tones of failure.
Of all the thinkers of antiquity, Aristotle was perhaps one of the most comprehensive, his works ranging over the landscape of knowledge, such as physics, politics, and ethics.
People who cannot accept courtesy when it comes their way feel uneasy if kindness seems to come to them with no strings attached.
Machines may sometimes be troublesome, frustrating, and even harmful. Once accustomed to the advantages they provide, however, you feel that they are almost indispensable to your daily life.
Distance learning can be particularly helpful if you are trying to pursue a degree while continuing to work full-time.
A great questioner, Socrates was a natural philosopher, and many consider him the first moralist in that he urged people to question their own values and the very purpose of living by raising the concept of morality and a code of ethics.
Curious about the world around them, children will often find their parents a leading model in their lives for answers.
Organizing your life by balancing your responsibilities to the best of your ability is an ongoing project. Every step that is achieved increasing your confidence and determination to keep going.
챕터 5. 생략이 일어난 문장 구조 이해하기.
Unit 17. Opinion is not fact, although if said often enough and loud enough, some people seem to believe it is.
From birth, you absorb and are shaped by the language, values, and patterns of behavior that characterize your own small, immediate group.
The most terrible acts committed by humans have often been the ones not of criminals or madmen, but of ordinary, loyal citizens acting in the presumed interests of their group against another group.
Considering that language is often used simply to describe concrete events in literature, there is no essential difference between literature and film, as literature uses words for description and film pictures.
While testing seems the most straightforward evidence about the effectiveness of teaching in schools, it is not necessarily thought to be by the majority of students.
For immigrants, contacts with the country of origin are now more frequent and result in more immigrant families being influenced to maintain cultural patterns from the homeland and attempt to influence their children to keep them.
Highly social animals, such as certain types of parrot, seem to be adversely affected when kept alone. Some parrots will engage in bizarre behaviors and can severely harm themselves.
Failure can be an opportunity if you are willing to change. If not, be prepared to fail again and again as the world attempts to teach you its lessons.
The first and best way for a baby to learn that exercise is a lifetime routine is by imitating his or her parents. So you should be your child's role model, incorporating physical activity into your daily routine and involving your child in your workout routine whenever possible.
What if your value and the essence of being loved aren't based on how you look or how well you do something? Actually, this concept is not in question, as it is a statement of fact and is entirely true.
Hamlet became and has remained famous, not only because it is an exceptionally rich and fascinating text, but also because it has been and still is being played, adapted, assessed, and quoted.
Unit 18. A horse is useless if no one can ride it, a sword if no one can strike with it, and meat if no one can eat it. Thus, every material utility depends on a related human ability.
Students criticized the textbooks for not having interesting activities, and teachers for not taking into account the students' knowledge levels. That's why they did not enjoy using the textbooks.
Age appears to be best in four things: old wood best to burn, old wine to drink, old friends to trust, and old authors to read.
Like many other alternative therapies, the popularity of hypnotherapy continues to grow, but there is still debate on the scientific basis of hypnosis, and there is much more on the validity of hypnotherapy.
In a research team, one member might be particularly good at experimental design, another at data analysis, and a third at writing reports. By learning who is good at what, the group facilitates collaboration.
Most data about social problems can't solve the problems because the data is mostly about how the problem is happening, but not about why. To define why from the data is the job researchers and policymakers need to focus on.
The finding that the intensity of a taste is decreased after trying the same taste, but not after trying a different taste, serves as evidence for the existence of distinct receptors for different tastes.
My political ideal is democracy. Everyone should be respected as an individual, but no one idolized.
When a person obeys another person, merely because the mightier of the two has power and threatens violence, the one giving the orders is a tyrant, and the one obeying them his slave.
Painting is sometimes thought to be a higher form of art than cartooning, theater higher than movies, and classic novels higher than blockbuster novels.
Unit 19. An electric car that its proponents hope will replace horse-drawn carriages at tourist attractions was proposed by those who say it's inhumane to have animals toiling.
Champions aren't made in gyms. Champions are made from something they have deep inside them, a desire, a dream, a vision.
It may not be valid to assume the media make our time distinct from the past, because we know relatively little about how information was shared in the past.
The most important single responsibility of the leader is to ensure harmony and happiness among the people he or she is responsible for.
An English engineer and canal builder, William Smith, discovered that each rock formation in the canals he worked on contained fossils, unlike those in the beds either above or below. It helped make evident the significance of fossils as geologic tools.
When you want to quit while your destination is just around the corner, it is the time you need to remind yourself that you are just some steps away to your goal and quitting is not an option.
High school should be the place young minds begin to develop their own way of looking at the world. It should be a place friendships are made and identities are created.
One prime reason international tourism in Europe has developed so strongly since 1945 has been the almost total absence of major political and military conflict in the region since the end of the Second World War.
If you saw the way some people treat the world, you would think there is somewhere else to go once the Earth's resources have been exhausted.
Individualized Achievable Challenge connects students to knowledge by communicating high expectations, confirming that they have the capacity to reach these goals, and showing them how to access the tools and support they need to reach goals they consider desirable.
Unit 20. Were it not for the special defenses they have against their enemies, many animals could not survive.
Some experts say that were Charles Darwin alive today, he would be delighted with the scientific validation of his theory of evolution.
When we pack, we are sometimes amazed to find that we don't need very many things to live. We wouldn't normally believe we could get by with such a tiny amount of stuff.
Should you find yourself in a chronically leaking boat, energy devoted to changing vessels is likely to be more productive than energy devoted to patching leaks.
The piano could hardly have become so popular had the music written for it not occupied a position at the top of European culture.
People who lack the inner skill of confidence don't try to accomplish what they might have the ability to accomplish were they confident and did try.
Rules and incentives are an inevitable and necessary part of our social and political life. The banking crisis would have been far less serious had Depression-era regulations not been removed and had existing regulations been enforced.
Indeed, abstracting is difficult for people in every discipline. Many famous novelists have written to their editors that they regretted the extreme length of their manuscripts. Had they had more time, the work would have been half as long.
Judgments about flavor are often influenced by predictions based on the appearance of the food. For example, red foods would be expected to be strawberry flavored.
The most difficult fact in the world could have been faced when it was simple, and the biggest problem in the world could have been solved when it was small. The simple fact that someone finds no problem big from the beginning is that person's prime achievement.
챕터 6. 어순에 주의해야 하는 구문.
Unit 21. An error does not become truth by reason of multiplied propagation, nor does truth become error because nobody sees it.
After non-stop rehearsals and diligent planning, when the campus-wide festival came around, enthusiasm was abundant, and so was creativity.
Food eaten without desire is difficult for the body to absorb nutrients from, and so is study done without interest difficult for the mind to process effectively.
We had career lessons and were instructed on how to find the right career path, but I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and neither did the majority of my classmates.
Understanding the cyclical nature of life will reassure you that difficult times won't last forever, and you will feel joy and happiness again. The rough times must be endured and taken as they come, but they are not constant, nor do they last forever.
There exists a peculiar correlation between what is in front of our eyes and what is in our heads. Large thoughts at times requiring large views, new thoughts, new places.
There are websites containing the answers to nearly any question about which you might be curious. Still, you must be careful to check the reliability of your source.
Although there are international agreements signed by some governments, people are killing whales without considering what impact this will have in the future.
Interested as I am in the physical universe, it is in man, in his loves and hatreds, his noble achievements and absurd failures, that I am more interested.
Much as we resemble one another, we are none of us exactly alike, and I have seen no reason why I should not, so far as I could, choose my own course.
Unit 22. Not until a geologist closely examines the fossils in the layers for the presence or absence of certain organisms can he or she recognize the gap in time.
Being a human, not always have I done the right thing, nor am I completely proud of every decision I have made, but I've learned from my mistakes and endeavor to improve.
Some people say the best way to be happy in life is to have a lot of money, but rarely does money appear to open the way for a more meaningful, exciting existence.
Only when confronted with solid experimental evidence or conceptually simpler hypotheses forcing them to new perspectives do scientists change their scientific theories.
Not only are humans unique in the sense that they began to use an ever-widening tool set, but we are also the only species on this planet that has constructed forms of complexity that use external energy sources.
Behind a seemingly effortless performance of professional music and theater are years of hard work and training.
Science and art belong to the whole world, and before them vanish the barriers of nationality.
Now available to scientists are technologies and equipment to measure the composition and structure of matter on a nanoscale.
More obvious is the fact that people who spend their lives watching television do not read as much as they ought to.
Hidden in our minds are our belief systems, which have been built from the moment we came into the world by our parents, family, culture, environment, and our education, and ultimately shape our own attitudes and behaviors.
So imprudent are we that we waste our lives thinking about the future, a time in which we are powerless, rather than focusing on the present, the time in which we have control.
Integrity is the key to defending ourselves against the virus of corruption, like an element in one's immune system. Such a crucial one is its role that not only individuals, but systems and institutions too need it.
Unit 23. The computer has made possible vast gains in industrial productivity and global communication.
The reason is not known why allergy to particular substances, such as pollen, metal, or food, occurs in some people and not in others.
By inviting parents to participate in childhood education programs, teachers have left open the possibility of collaborating with children and adults and expanding the community.
Astronomers no longer regard as fanciful the idea that they may one day pick up signals which have been sent by intelligent beings on other worlds.
Experts in education recommend that teachers withhold their personal opinions in classroom discussions, as the position of the teacher carries with it an authority that might influence some students to accept the teacher's opinion without question, and thus miss the point of the activity.
The streets of medieval cities were sadly far below ideal. They were not always paved, though occasionally one finds in medieval records a note of the payment for a street to be covered in stone.
Science has brought within the reach of the multitudes benefits and advantages that were only available to privileged people up until recently.
In Plato's famous cave metaphor, prisoners were imagined tied in such a way that they saw only the shadows of passers-by, and they believed the shadows to be real, never guessing the complex reality that was accessible if they would but turn their heads.
Although competition has contributed a lot to the development of society, it remains true that conditions continue to persist that make it hard for us to stay calm and be free of anxiety.
Because of some research showing that people already get plenty of vitamins from the food they eat, the question is often asked whether multivitamins should be taken each day.
Wagner's The Ring of the Nibelungs is distinctive in that it is almost entirely operatic, Also unusual is the fact that the libretti for his operas were written by the composer himself, a task normally reserved for a poet or literary notable.
Unit 24. Greek vases were decorated with detailed paintings showing daily life, hunts, gods, and festivals. Much of what we know about ancient Greek life we learned by studying these vases.
Camping in the wilderness, we spent the first few nights shivering in a shaky tent and guarded against the icy wind. These hardships we endured, and I thought it was worth it because we could see a majestic sunrise the next morning.
The accumulated layers of energy-rich organic matter, such as land plants and marine life, were gradually turned into coal and oil by the pressure of the overlying earth. The energy stored in their molecular structure we can now release by burning.
Influencer marketing arrived in the nick of time and has allowed brands to regain the attention of their consumers. Behind this success lies a profitable collaboration between advertisers and influencers.
We must consider the status of African American English as that of an endangered species in need of protection. If we don't, we can expect this fragile, irreplaceable repository, where history and community are kept, to become extinct, and along with it will be extinguished much of what constitutes their identity.
Cities across the globe are coping with myriad challenges, from collapsing fertility, migration from rural areas, and the disappearance of the middle class. Topping these is the fact that cities account for a huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions worldwide.
Managing risks to stay competitive is a challenge many businesses are facing, and linked to this is the importance of having the right talent, the right team, and the right capability to make such decisions.
So many things my teacher told me I will understand in time, and I can't wait to see how the seeds he planted within me grow.
With a growth mindset, individuals are more likely to continue working hard, and that, however tough it is to work with, they will retain until they achieve their goals.
챕터 7. 병렬 구조를 파악하기 어려운 이유.
Unit 25. When dealing with a problem, slowing down provides time to consider how the issue has been framed and whether we have really considered all the relevant factors.
Variations in residents' feelings about tourism's relationship to environmental damage are related to the type of tourism. The extent to which residents feel the natural environment needs to be protected, and the distance residents live from the tourist attractions.
Guilt is anger directed at ourselves, at what we did or did not do. Resentment is anger directed at others, at what they did or did not do.
Creative thinking is fostered in classrooms, where children are given opportunities to explore new materials and ideas, and to construct new knowledge and skills.
To attract and impress audiences, the news media employ sophisticated techniques that project a reassuring appearance of credibility and that make their stories seem unbiased, comprehensive, and utterly factual.
Critics of group work urge that schools re-examine their policies and allow some students to work on their own. They believe there is no reason to make some students cooperate with other students with whom they have little in common and for whom they do the lion's share of the work.
Language is the medium through which groups preserve their innate cultures. Educational transactions take place and norms and laws are established.
Without government support of the arts, there would be a great deal of cultural wealth lost because of the lack of power to either promote creation or protect it for future generations.
Make progress every day. We understand that life is not always about dramatic change, but more often about the small steps and achievements we make each day.
Animals and people who have been raised in extreme social isolation are poor at reading emotional cues in those around them, not because they lack the basic circuitry for empathy, but because, lacking emotional tutors, they have never learned to pay attention to these messages, so haven't practiced this skill.
Unit 26. Instead of trying to get children to buckle down, why not focus on getting them to take pleasure in meaningful, productive activity which intrigues them to take steps toward learning new skills and natural joy in learning what they want to learn?
Don't think of today as just another day of your life, but a grand opportunity nature has offered you to surmount the hurdles you couldn't surmount yesterday.
We recall information that we've learned most effectively when we're given reminder prompts, such as the initial letter of a required word, and when we are presented with a good memory trigger. The relevant memory web draws the memory out.
The ability to maintain some flexibility in both your ideas and your habits will decrease your inclination to disagree and increase your ability to compromise and move toward a solution.
The odor of a flower is usually constant, while color can appear different under different lighting conditions, and shape changes with damage from wind and herbivores.
Unless we ensure to the enemies of freedom the liberties which they are keen to abuse, then we deny the essence of what we ultimately stand for, and are therefore no better than those to whom we are opposed.
Substitute yogurt, low-fat milk, avocados for heavy cream, or fresh herbs for salt, and you'll lower risks for heart disease, diabetes, and other diseases.
We spend a lot of time in teaching children how to read, less in teaching them how to speak, and hardly any in teaching them how to listen. But the importance of these skills in business is essentially reversed.
Mediation parallels advocacy insofar as it tends to involve a process of negotiation, but differs insofar as mediation involves adopting a neutral role between two opposing parties rather than supporting the case of one party against another.
Marketing focuses on the needs of the consumer, ultimately benefiting the seller as well. When a product or service is truly marketed, the needs of the consumer are considered from the very beginning of the new product development process, and the product-service mix is designed to meet the unsatisfied needs of the consuming public.
Unit 27. What culture does is take what is available in the physical and human environment, interpret it socially, and fill it with socially shared meaning and feeling.
There are many medications that are safe and effective when taken alone, but ineffective or counterproductive when taken in combination with something else.
Time pressure leads to frustration, and when we are frustrated or experience other negative emotions, our thinking becomes narrower and less creative.
If we trivialize art and remove it from the core of a mainstream education, we not only deny our students full access to one of humankind's most profound experiences, but miss countless opportunities to understand the important role art plays in culture.
What liberals believe is that the fundamental problem originates in society, not in the offenders themselves, and that the best strategy for preventing violent crime is to eliminate poverty and inequality by creating jobs and providing social services.
Although it's not uncommon for women to play sports and for men to become nurses, society still has some pretty clear definitions of what men and women should do, how they should handle situations, and what responsibilities they should take care of.
Joseph Schumpeter, an influential economist, expressed the view that the essence of capitalism is the process of creative destruction, the perpetual cycle of destroying the old and less efficient product or service and replacing it with new, more efficient ones.
Everyone has stress in their lives. Sometimes emotional reactions to perceived or actual challenges, demands, threats, or changes are helpful and give you the rush of adrenaline you need to get somewhere on time or motivate you to get things done.
When your attention is not on the present moment but on something else, you will tend to compare even good experiences with others, or you will wonder about future experiences instead of enjoying the present one, and regret past experiences because they are already over.
Overly positive assumptions can lead to disastrous miscalculations, make us less likely to get health checkups or wear a cycle helmet, and more likely to commit all of our money to a bad investment. But mild optimism protects and inspires us. It keeps us moving forward rather than backward.
Unit 28. It became more common for artists to determine individually the appearance and content of their own work, and, in their search for new forms of self-expression, to make art that was often very controversial.
Organizations need to invest in data mining techniques to uncover hidden patterns, discover new knowledge, and, as a consequence, gain more insight into the current business situation.
Money, when earned doing something you have a passion for, will always bring you happiness and joy. And in more cases than not, when someone has a passion in something and there is a market for it, they become rich.
If you take a closer look at your life, you may be able to find your life purpose. It could be as simple as raising a family, being a good friend, or emotionally encouraging others.
Make sure your wrists, forearms, and shoulders can stay relaxed while you work, and, this is important, keep in mind that even if you sit in the correct position, you'll still need to get up and stretch your body once in a while.
Deficiencies of innate ability may be compensated for through persistent hard work and concentration. One might say that work substitutes for talent, or better yet, that it creates talent.
Iron rusts from disuse. Water loses its purity from stagnation, and in cold weather becomes frozen. Even so does inaction sap the vigor of the mind.
It will not do to dismiss magic as nonsensical, because rationality is conditional in that the information available affects what is rational. And without modern science, it was impossible for people to know what worked and what did not.
In our day-to-day life, we often come across some people who outwardly behave like friends, but at difficult times of life play a passive role or slowly disappear.
My parents having had a cup of green tea after every meal, I grew up on tea, and though I found it bitter at first, came to enjoy it for its taste and health benefits.
Does Western culture always extinguish a local culture that buys into a Western way of doing things? Or, on the other hand, do the myriad pockets of local cultures around the world simultaneously receive and transform the Western commodities and styles in a way that resists total homogenization?
챕터 8. 비교 구문에서 정확히 이해해야 할 것들.
Unit 29. If a drop of water were magnified to the size of the world, the atoms in it would be about as large as baseballs.
For those who need only a few items, it is far more reasonable to pull up to a highly streamlined convenience store than to run to a supermarket.
Water is the most essential resource for economic growth, sustainable development, or the alleviation of poverty worldwide of all the resources.
Exclusivity in problem solving, even with a genius, is not as effective as inclusivity, where everyone's ideas are heard and a solution is developed through collaboration.
Yawning may be one of the most important mechanisms for regulating survival-related behavior in mammals. So if you want to stay alert and active, yawn as many times a day as possible, especially when you're confronting a difficult problem at work and when you feel anger, anxiety, or stress.
There is gravity on the moon, but the gravitational force is much weaker than the Earth's. Thus, objects on the moon weigh 1/6 as much as they do on the Earth.
The less willing you are to share your problems with loved ones and friends, the more those problems will come to overwhelm you.
Certainly, it should be clear that the more science we possess, the more philosophy we need, because the more power we have, the more direction we need.
If you are not exposed to many types of books, you will not develop a true appreciation for reading, much less the skills necessary to become a great writer.
Erik Erikson, well known for his psychosocial development theory, emphasizes that no factor is as important as trust in the child's developing personality. According to him, basic trust involves having the courage to let go of the familiar and take a step toward the unknown.
Except for nuclear war or a collision with an asteroid, no force has more potential to damage our planet's web of life than global warming.
Unit 30. As a source of exchange, innovation, and creativity, cultural diversity is as necessary for humankind as biodiversity is for nature.
Unsurprisingly, people who use the internet daily were much more likely than those classified as light users to feel informed about international news.
In the language of dance, connecting steps are as important to ballet as pronouns and prepositions are to a sentence. Without them, all you are left with is a series of poses, not a sequence of movement.
Companies that change constantly but without any consistent rationale will collapse just as surely as those that change not at all.
Britain was attached to Europe during the last ice age and remains close to Europe, and consequently its isolation is not as profound as that of New Zealand, which is a considerable distance from the nearest continent.
When a person lies, their responses will come more slowly because the brain needs more time to process the details of a new invention than to recall stored facts.
You can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you.
Anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured.
Greenwashing is the activity that makes people believe that a company is doing more to protect the environment than it really is by taking an existing product and spinning its environmentally friendly virtues, even if there are none.
While most newspapers are discarded after a day, magazines can be kept for months and are often widely shared, which means that ads in magazines stand a better chance than newspaper ads of being seen and remembered.
Unit 31. There are people who are knowledgeable about mundane things, plumbing, carpentry, or baseball, for example, but intellectuals who possess lots of knowledge about academic topics tend to be more commonly called knowledgeable.
From now on, telecommuting or self-study will be more common in our lifestyle. Remaining energized and motivated can be more challenging without a support system, but it can be achieved with planning and disciplined action.
Against the background of homeschooling gaining in popularity, many studies have shown that students benefit more in a classroom setting since the interaction with other students creates a stimulating learning environment.
Although the American is not comfortable with long periods of silence in the conversation, the Asian will take time to answer. This can carry over into the classroom, as the English learner from other cultures may be slower to answer for a multitude of reasons, such as thinking of how to translate or cultural conversational style.
We need more effective ways to ensure that every citizen can fully exercise the right to secure private information.
As you grow and become a nicer person, your relationships should grow and improve as well, and in the same proportion.
If officials had made the right decision when the cracks were first found in the building, the collapse might have been prevented, or at least managed better.
One of the effects of aging is that your body becomes less able to regulate its temperature in such a way that you are unable to properly judge if you are warm or cold.
Supposing we have a high sense of self-confidence, we will set higher goals, be less afraid of failure, and persist longer when we encounter difficulties.
Our happiness and our free self-expression is much more assured if we let go of end results, work toward your goals, and don't be imprisoned by them.
If we lived in a society with no hypothetical situations, our society might be drastically less advanced. Human imagination and creativity are the foundation on which science and technology can be explored.
Unit 32. The increases in skill and technology themselves have ensured no more of an increase in human happiness or well-being than academic development has.
It is important, not so much to give a man bread, as to put him in the way of earning it for himself, not to give direct aid, but to help others to help themselves.
A year after the historic tornado outbreak, the unusually quiet weather has resulted in a somewhat peaceful spring. There was not so much as a single tornado warning issued by the Weather Service.
Thinking is a natural thing, just like breathing or nutrition. This means that we do not learn to think any more than we learn to breathe or to assimilate food.
Researchers have recognized that laughter is no less beneficial than exercise in terms of enhancing our physical and mental performance. Laughing can create significant hormonal changes in the body, ultimately helping it resist disease and in some cases curing it.
Surprisingly, despite the enormous opportunities in a family for exposing children to the foods eaten by the parents, parental preferences are weak predictors of child food preferences. In fact, they are no better predictors than the preferences of other adults.
Having knowledge but lacking the power to express it clearly is no better than never having any ideas at all.
To encourage student participation in group discussion, it is recommended to involve no more than 20 persons and to plan the material to be covered carefully.
Many phenomena mystify the human mind, and when people do not have scientific explanations, they will construct other explanations that, no less than the former, influence their conduct.
People can enjoy perishable foods like fruits, vegetables, and dairy products, previously storable for not more than a month, for up to 6 months of the year, due to the invention of canning and the ubiquity of fridges.
While on a diet, you should eat less, but not less than 1,200 calories, since extreme restriction of consumed calories sends signals to your body to conserve calories, which can significantly slow your metabolic rate and hinder your weight loss goals.
챕터 9. 아는 것 같지만 한 번 더 생각해야 하는 구문.
Unit 33. It is likely that any major enterprise that was ever undertaken had an expert arguing conclusively that it would not succeed.
Speaking of rudeness, to be rude is not just to be selfish. In the way that children, until taught otherwise, and animals are instinctively selfish, it is a decision to ignore others that results in being alone.
Resilience is accepting your new reality, even if it's less good than the one you had before. You can fight it, you can do nothing but scream about what you've lost, or you can accept that and try to put together something that's good.
Should you put a very dirty garment into a washing machine with other clothes, it may cause all the garments to be muddy-looking after they have been laundered.
People who are very interested in keeping up with the latest fashion trends will not wear the clothes that they bought last year, even though those are still in perfect condition.
Leadership requires the skill to be a cause for positive change by doing the right thing at the right time, and this is what makes a person capable of being a leader.
Temperatures tend to be at their highest between 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., so that is a good time to avoid being outside to stay hydrated during hot weather, and this will keep you from getting heat stroke.
We often forget that the main purpose of criticizing is not to be negative but to be constructive, to fix something. But general criticism is destructive, and it doesn't lead anyone to know how to fix things. It just makes people feel bad.
Unlike the modern society, the primitive society had less specialized knowledge to transmit, and since its way of life was enacted before the eyes of all, it had no need to create a separate institution of education, such as the school.
Medical waste holds risk for infection, so it has to be handled with special methods to prevent a biological risk from being introduced to the environment or community.
Only true acting can completely absorb an audience, making it not only understand but participate emotionally in all that is transpiring on the stage, thus enriching the audience with an inner experience that will not be erased by time.
Unit 34. Lower consumption of meat and dairy products, accompanied by a proportional reduction in livestock production, would reduce greenhouse gas emissions as well as the area of land use.
In a normal year without recession, students would have successfully finished their job hunting while still in their final year of university.
Just a fraction near the sun, the Earth would be a furnace like Venus, considering the temperature of the sun, which is around 6,000 degrees Celsius.
Industrial diamonds are so important that a shortage would cause a breakdown in the metalworking industry and would destroy mass production.
An intelligent person would have comprehended that the perfect singing of the singer was not due to natural gifts alone. The singer had received a thorough training, and though young, she was very proficient.
It would be imprudent, not to say foolish, to rely on your instincts and intuition all the time.
The quickest way to enjoy your hobby more is to make it a job. To turn a hobby into a business would give you the passion to truly enjoy your work.
Invented 10,000 years earlier, the camera could have recorded mammoths wandering the plains during the last ice age.
Recognized by a wider audience, Franz Kafka might have been appreciated during his time, but the author died from tuberculosis at age 40, before much of his work was published or even finished.
It is necessary to televise trials to increase the chance of a fair trial. If trials are televised, a huge audience will be made aware of cases, and crucial witnesses who would otherwise be ignorant of a case may come forward.
The recent spirit of cooperation among various branches of the sciences has led to a number of discoveries which otherwise might not have been made.
Probably unconsciously, primitive hunters had moved from Asia across the land bridge to hunt animals and become the first immigrants to the new land. Without the Ice Age, North America might have remained unpopulated for thousands of years more.
What keeps all of the scholars going when things are going badly is their passion for their academic work, but for passion they would achieve nothing.
Unit 35. Since there are variations among students in their school performance and in their potential to excel academically, not all students pursue the same course of academic training.
It is important to be mindful about every single aspect of purchasing food. Try not to race through your shopping. In my hometown, nobody would buy a melon without feeling it and smelling it, and nobody would dream of buying a chicken without knowing which farm it came from and what it ate.
Just because you are intelligent or have great knowledge does not mean you can think critically. Critical thinking is about how we use our intelligence and knowledge to reach objective and rational viewpoints.
Because a man has his faults, it does not follow that what he has produced, sponsored, or been associated with is worthless. Likewise, because a man is beyond praise, it does not follow that his every idea is so good that it doesn't need to be examined.
The age of 3.5 is not without its charm. One of the more amusing aspects of this age is the child's often vivid imagination, which is expressed most strikingly in their enjoyment of imaginary companions.
In less developed countries, the quality and scale of secondary education are far from adequate and need to be reformed in order to meet the UN's universal education target.
Futurists agree that schooling needs to prepare students for jobs that don't exist yet, to work with tools that have yet to be created, and to solve problems that have yet to be identified.
Over the past couple of years, we have seen an explosion in social media, and now it seems everyone is rushing to jump on the bandwagon for fear that they be left out of the opportunities that it can offer.
What does it matter if we have a new book or an old book if we open neither?
People in the world today who subsist by hunting, fishing, and gathering plants are not following an ancient way of life because they do not know any better. They are doing it either because they have been forced by circumstances into a situation where foraging is the best means of survival, or because they simply prefer to live this way.
Unit 36. Some changes in the environment have been caused by natural events. Many more are the result of things that people have done.
Superstitious behavior is the result of people believing that when specific activities are followed by rewards, they are the cause of the positive reinforcement, even though this may not be true.
The great explosion of scientific creativity in 16th century Europe was certainly helped by the sudden spread of information brought about by Gutenberg's use of movable type and printing, and by the legitimation of everyday languages, which rapidly replaced Latin as the medium of discourse.
The phenomenon that safety measures, like mandatory wearing of seatbelts, contribute to careless driving may be accounted for by the notion that a greater sense of security tempts people to take more risks.
Before the modern scientific era, creativity was attributed to a superhuman force. All novel ideas originated with the gods. The Latin verb for inspire also means breathe into, reflecting that creative inspiration was regarded as similar to God first breathing life into man.
Some of the difference in longevity between species is ascribed to the degree to which they manufacture their own antioxidants, which absorb harmful materials before they cause damage to their bodies.
In general, since the transition from hunter-gatherer lifestyles to farming, the establishment of agriculture has been accompanied by the domestication of cattle and other livestock.
While rainbows are often preceded by violent storms that might otherwise make us cold, wet, and uncomfortable, looking up afterward to see an incredibly colorful arch in the sky somehow makes us feel better.
When infant mortality rates are high, as they are in much of the developing world, parents tend to have high numbers of children to ensure that some will survive to adulthood. There has never been a sustained drop in birth rates that was not first preceded by a sustained drop in infant mortality.
The musician is survived by his wife, children, and countless music fans across the world to whom his iconic legacy will live on forever.
챕터 10. 과감히 건너뛰고 적극적으로 예측하라.
Unit 37. Once a bottle of perfume has been opened, it becomes susceptible to oxidation, a process that changes the chemical makeup and therefore the smell of the perfume.
Archaeologists have discovered the bones of 10,000 wild horses at the bottom of a cliff in France. The remains of herds stampeded over the cliff top by groups of cooperative and ingenious Paleolithic hunters 17,000 years ago.
The famous expression, "keep your friends close, but keep your enemies even closer," was exemplified well in Nelson Mandela's attempt to learn Afrikaans, the language of his enemy.
Geothermal heat generated inside the earth helps keep the temperature of the ground at a depth of several meters at a nearly constant temperature of about 10 degrees Celsius to 20 degrees Celsius.
One factor contributing to students' difficulty in making accurate judgments of their own knowledge is hindsight bias, the tendency to assume once something happens that one knew all along that it was going to happen.
Based on the findings of educational psychologists, guidance on teenagers' social media usage was provided. Parents should pay more attention to their children, and teachers should inform them of the negative effects.
Every part of history is intimately interconnected with every other part in such a way that all melt imperceptibly into one another. No part of it would be quite as it is without the preceding parts.
Learned helplessness is based on the underlying conviction that there is no connection, no matter what you do or how much you try, between your personal actions or abilities and the outcome or result. A belief that it doesn't matter what you do because it won't work anyway.
The so-called Mozart effect, the theory that listening to Mozart will make your child smarter, is a good example of a scientific finding being distorted by the media through hype not warranted by the research.
Researchers have long observed and recorded birds building nests of different sizes and shapes, often becoming more elaborate as they matured, suggesting that there is some learning involved in building nests.
Unit 38. By the early 19th century in England, traditional concepts of marriage, such as an alliance between families, a pairing on the basis of wealth or birth, or an arrangement made by parents, had been changed by the romantic notion of love.
Artists who produce fine art must be sensitive to the laws of physics. A sculpture, for example, must be stable, which requires the sculptor to understand the properties of mass, weight distribution, and stress.
Many doctors are now recommending a ritual that other cultures, particularly the Swedes and Finns, have long relied on: dry heat saunas followed by cold showers to restore the body externally and internally.
Members of a group tend to avoid promoting viewpoints outside the comfort zone of consensus thinking, which may cause them to ignore individual doubts for fear of upsetting the group's balance.
In Chinese food, the idea is that food should be boiling hot because that is crucial to its flavor, embodied in the phrase wok kai, which means the breath or essence of the combination of tastes added by a hot wok.
When a company comes out with a new product, its competitors typically go on the defensive, doing whatever they can to reduce the odds that the offering will eat into their sales.
Being able to forgive, to let go of angry thoughts and feelings, promotes the body's natural ability to return from an aroused state to a normal state.
Online, we can hang out in chat rooms with like-minded souls, join social networks that reflect our beliefs and interests, and even read news blogs that reflect our individual ideologies and views of the world. That is, groups are now formed less on shared activities and more on shared ideologies.
Although whales are aquatic creatures, they are mammals. In other words, they feed milk to their young and are also warm-blooded.
Before you give advice, that is to say, advice which you have not been asked to give, it is well to put to yourself two questions, namely, what is your motive for giving it, and what is it likely to be worth?
Anxiety, which is overly zealous mental preparation for an anticipated threat, is disastrous cognitive interference when it captures all your attention and intrudes on all other attempts to focus elsewhere.
Unit 39. Many scientists believe that clues to much of Earth's origins, as well as many other answers to life on our planet, may lie within the unexplored ocean depths.
The total characteristics of a plant depend on which genes it has received from the parent plants, whether those genes are switched on, expressed, and also the interactions between the genes and environmental factors.
In convenience stores, consumers can quickly find an array of goods: bread, milk, tissues, aspirin, as well as several efficient self-serve items such as coffee, sandwiches, microwavable instant food, etc.
Cost of production seems, on the surface, to be a useful element to economic analysis. Furthermore, non-economists relate well to the concept of cost of production, while supply functions, input-demand functions, and other important issues are less obvious concepts.
A process of critique and argumentation engages all scientists. They examine things, for example, each other's ideas, and look for flaws. Moreover, science has established a formal mechanism of peer review for establishing the credibility of any individual scientist's work.
If you know how to give yourself time to rest well without worries, you can get ready to keep on working, and what is more, you can improve the quality of your work.
Loneliness is clearly related to impaired mental health and carries a significant social stigma as well, as the social perceptions of lonely people are generally unfavorable.
A teacher is a role model influencing every facet of the student's growth and developing their innate potentials. Besides, the teacher of today is also responsible for enabling and empowering the learner to emerge as a competent youth.
It goes without saying that any estimate of a modern novel is valueless unless it is based on knowledge of the great works of the past. But at the same time, it is no use estimating the value of the great works of the past unless it is based on knowledge of the novels of the present. In fact, all literary work, both of the past and of today, exists as if it were in an eternal present.
It has been claimed that no specific knowledge or experience is required to attain insight in the problem situation. As a matter of fact, one should break away from experience and let the mind wander freely.
Many people know that one can experience stress while traveling. However, research has found that the most common stressful travel experiences were actually related to pre-travel issues and planning, such as financial concerns, packing, making travel arrangements, and developing the itinerary.
Unit 40. Wood carving is most successful if it is in harmony with the pre-existing grain and knots of the wood. In a similar fashion, learning is most successful if it takes into account the pre-existing behavior structures of the organism.
When you avoid what you fear for a short time, your fear does decrease. Over a longer period, however, avoidance allows the anxiety to flourish, paradoxically growing your fear.
Today, products like food containers, cigarette lighters, contact lenses, and even cameras have become throwaways. Similarly, clothing and accessories are perishable in the sense that once they are out of style, their usefulness expires.
Parts of human nature that seem negative can be turned to the common good, such as our tendency to imitate, which leads people to follow a leader's example. Likewise, qualities such as selfishness can be a powerful driving force if channeled correctly.
Most beliefs can be tested to see if they are correct or false. However, some types of beliefs cannot be tested because we cannot get external evidence in our lifetimes, such as a belief that the Earth will stop spinning on its axis by the year 9999, or that there is life on a planet 100 million light-years away.
Unlucky people tend to be creatures of routine. In contrast, many lucky people try to introduce variety into their lives, boosting the likelihood of opportunities.
When a child takes an IQ test, his or her results are compared with the results of tests taken by other children of the same age. An adult's test results, on the other hand, are compared with the results of all other adults, not just adults of the same age.
Some people go vegan or become a mediator to get the longevity benefits of healthy habits. In fact, a healthy life is attainable for many of us with just a few small changes that aren't especially hard to do and won't make you miserable.
To reconstitute democracy in line with our present situation, we need to challenge the frightening but false assumption that increased diversity automatically brings increased tension and conflict in society. Indeed, the exact reverse can be true. The reality is, conflict in society is not only necessary, it is, within limits, desirable.
챕터 11 구문의 짝을 찾아라.
Unit 41. Is it socially desirable or acceptable to change certain genes of a normal human individual to alter or enhance traits?
The invention of the microscope made it possible for scientists to learn more about what causes diseases.
More than any other development, it has been the exceptionally rapid growth of computer technology that has changed every aspect of our lives.
It is careful planning, not luck, which results in chances to nurture a new or unique idea that takes you to the next level in your life.
It goes without saying that preparation is the key to any negotiation, and it is no surprise to find that the most successful negotiators are more prepared than unsuccessful negotiators.
It is true that intelligent students would undoubtedly score high in memory functions, but it is doubtful whether they are also fluent in producing creative ideas.
Every man who knows how to read has it in his power to magnify himself, to multiply the ways in which he exists, to make his life full, significant, and interesting.
Though some people have felt that only the lonely play with imaginary playmates, the research makes it very evident that it is often the highly superior and imaginative child who invents these creatures.
It was patterns in the organized and regular motions of stars and other celestial objects that ancient humans tried to recognize, just as present-day scientists search for patterns and trends in natural phenomena.
What is it that makes us uneasy about accepting credit for something wonderful we have done? We feel proud of our accomplishments and our skills, but we don't know how to take credit for them gracefully.
Thomas Edison was looked upon as a fool by his teachers, and it was only because his mother inspired him to believe that one day he would do something great that he became the man he was.
Unit 42. In small villages, everyone, in a sense, becomes a judge. In such societies, social disapproval of people's activities can serve both as powerful punishment for and as strong deterrent to crime.
When two people communicate or work together, only one of two possibilities will result. Either the more negative person will lower the spirits of the more positive person, or the more positive person will somehow lift the spirits of the other.
Not only are batteries at risk of giving off toxic gases if damaged, but core ingredients such as lithium and cobalt are finite and extraction can lead to water pollution and depletion, among other environmental consequences.
Children should never be required to learn the name of anything in their study of nature, but the name should be used so often and so naturally in their presence that they will learn it without being conscious of the process.
Human beings have unlimited wants and resources available in nature, which should be used to meet those human wants are limited. That is, there is never such a complete time that a human being is satisfied and not in need of anything.
No sooner had we learned a new idea or technique that another one came along and replaced or enhanced what we had learned.
Scarcely had Arthur Conan Doyle begun publishing Sherlock Holmes stories when an avid fan base sprang up, the beginning of an international following.
As reading without discussion can fail to yield the full measure of understanding that should be sought, so discussion without the substance that good and great books afford is likely to degenerate into little more than an exchange of superficial opinions.
Just as there has never been a day that did not give way to night or a storm that lasted forever, so we move back and forth on the pendulum of life, the day and the night, the good and the bad, etc.
Just as you cannot explain a thought to someone if you did not fully understand that thought, neither can you translate or interpret something without mastery of the subject matter being relayed.
Unit 43. Every society needs heroes, and every society has them. Some heroes shine in the face of great adversity, performing amazing deeds in difficult situations. Others do their work quietly, unnoticed by most of us, but making a difference in the lives of other people.
Geniuses are too much superior to those around them to be understood at once, and their books, music, statues, or pictures are usually too superior to be quickly appreciated.
There is an ongoing debate in the field of emotional intelligence. Some scholars see emotional intelligence as a set of skills that can be taught and learned, while others say it is largely inborn.
The important difference between technology and magic is not that technology works and magic does not, but that one deals with what we understand, while the other with what still remains a mystery.
There is an inseparable relation between diligence and success. The former is the cause, and the latter is the effect.
When setting goals, it is recommended that the goals be difficult enough to be a challenge, yet realistic enough to achieve. The key is to balance the gap between the status quo and the goal.
Volunteers are so vital a part of the nation's economy, social atmosphere, and overall well-being as to relieve a huge burden from the public sector and create a cooperative atmosphere in the community.
Some physicians propose that there is no direct relationship between the severity of the wound and the intensity of pain, but that the meaning our minds give to an injury greatly determines the level of pain.
In a tour of over 10 different galleries and art spaces, the visitors will see everything from new and unconventional street art to classic pieces of art displayed in the local museum.
I wish I hadn't spent so much energy when I was younger trying to please those whose opinions never mattered.
Unit 44. We abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect.
perfection, or the attribution of that quality to celebrities creates a perceived distance that the general public cannot relate to, making those who never make mistakes perceived as being less attractive or likable.
Even though it has become fashionable to view the differences between men's and women's minds as social in origin, the temptation to seek an explanation in terms of inborn differences between the sexes remains strong.
Keep your self-doubt and fear of failure from holding you back from giving your dreams a shot by pushing yourself to take action.
Rushing through a lot of complex content robs most students in class of the time they need to engage deeply with the novel ideas, leaving little chance of recall.
Deprived of oxygen, the body's cells malfunction and die. Deprived of information, the organization's individuals and departments cannot work properly. To avoid malfunction and massive failure in the organization, it's important to keep communicating.
You can map out your goals and tape them to the refrigerator so you're reminded of both what you want to accomplish and how you're getting there.
Ultimately, in science, new ideas will take root only if you can convince your colleagues of the validity of your results.
Too often, we limit our employment opportunities to what we're familiar with, and we do not dare to think about trying training in a completely new field.
Chewing leads to smaller particles for swallowing and more exposed surface area for digestive enzymes to act on. In other words, it means the extraction of more fuel and raw materials from a mouthful of food.
챕터 12. 길고 복잡한 문장의 해결.
Unit 45. One thing I know is that the only ones among you who will be really happy are those who will have sought and found how to serve.
Music can transport you to that wonderful holiday, that perfect relationship, that great night out, or any time when you were in a situation where you enjoyed yourself.
When I entered the museum, the first thing that caught my eye was a colorful painting consisting of traditional patterns, which were illustrated with geometric figures.
You can get away from envy by enjoying the pleasures that come your way, by doing the work that you have to do, and by avoiding comparisons with those whom you imagine, perhaps quite falsely, to be more fortunate than yourself.
Unless an actor speaks and moves in the manner in which the imaginary character whose part he or she is playing would do, it will be hard for the audience to feel immersed in the story.
One school of modern economic theory argues that people give to charities in part because of the pleasure they get either from imagining the relief of those they benefit or from their own relief from alleviating their sympathetic distress.
Our modern society should provide appropriate education or training sessions for a sufficient number of people who possess the technical skill required to maintain and develop the numerous devices upon which our convenience depends.
Confirmation bias is a term for how the mind systematically avoids confronting contradiction by overvaluing evidence that confirms what we already think or feel, and undervaluing or simply disregarding evidence that refutes it.
The phrase emotional labor refers to a situation where work-related entities regulate the way a person manages his or her emotion in order to shape the state of mind of another individual, such as a customer.
Yellow journalism sometimes took the form of gossip about public figures, as well as about socialites who considered themselves private figures, and even about those who were not part of high society but had found themselves involved in a scandal, crime, or tragedy that journalists thought would sell papers.
Unit 46. If all mankind minus one were of one opinion, and only one person were of the contrary opinion, mankind could be no more justified in silencing that one person than he, if he had the power, would be justified in silencing mankind.
How interested people are in their work, how much control they feel they have over their work, and how much support they get from their employer are collectively much more important in predicting job satisfaction than are their salaries.
Generally speaking, the more uncertain of success or easily sidetracked you are, the more likely it is that you will do an assignment or chore later.
In reality, the people who are most different from us probably have the most to teach us. The more we surround ourselves with people who are the same as we are, who hold the same views and share the same values, the greater the likelihood that we will shrink as human beings rather than grow.
It's not the failures nor wrong decisions that define us so much as how we respond to our life challenges, growing to become better people and learning to bounce back.
In conversation, one is likely to find out certain things about another person, not so much from what that other person says as from how he or she says it, for the speaker cannot avoid giving the listener clues about where they come from or what sort of people they are.
The great use of school education is not so much to teach you lots of different pieces of knowledge as to teach you the art of learning, so you can apply that art for yourself to any matter you will face in later life.
Science consists not in the collection of varied facts any more than the random piling up of stones is architecture, but in the detection of the principles which relate even the most dissimilar and abnormal facts to each other, and of the order which combines the parts into a whole.
No single flower is so universally known, so closely connected with the culture of many civilizations, and so rich in poetic and mythological significance as the rose.
Changes in employment may bring advantages in many ways, yet they also come with some disadvantages, the most outstanding of which is the fact that one is never as efficient in a new position, a new environment, and among new associates, as he is where he is familiar with the details of his work and has the confidence of his associates.
Unit 47. It is when you are going through your most difficult experiences that you must draw on your ability to control your mind and have faith that the difficulty you face is simply part of the process that will inevitably bring you through to your goal.
Such has been the effect of materialism that it tends to be believed by many, rather uncritically, that wealth is a central life goal and that the possession of it will increase our happiness.
It is so simple to find time to be out of your home, whether for a walk, for a run, or just for a phone call you take on a park bench, and it is imperative, no matter how briefly, for us to get sunlight.
Anybody who has been seriously engaged in scientific work of any kind realizes that over the entrance to the gates of the Temple of Science are written the words, "You must have faith."
Humanity's growing freedom from superstition results from the conviction that the world is not governed by caprice, but that it is a world of order and can be understood if we will only try hard enough and be smart enough.
There is good evidence that the current obesity crisis is caused, in part, not by what we eat, though this is of course vital too, but by the degree to which our food has been processed before we eat it, because processed soft texture of food is an important factor in weight gain.
The avocado is a pear-shaped, green-fleshed fruit and is known for its health benefits, but for some, the fact that there are downsides to the avocado due to its recent trade explosion, massive water usage, or the potential for unethical treatment of workers in certain production areas might be a concern.
It was a tremendous moral shock to most intelligent people that the proof of man's having uncovered one of the innermost secrets of the universe should have been the making and using of a weapon of mass destruction, the atomic bomb.
19th century hermeneuticians challenged the assumption that the author had any privileged insight into the meaning of his or her text by critically examining the active process entailed in reading, and thus the need to construct rather than merely to recover meaning from a text.
However poetic, realistic, impressive, or diverting an object is, it is not an object of art unless it calls up in a man the feeling, utterly distinct from all other feelings, of joy, of spiritual union with another, the author, and with others, listeners or spectators, who perceive the same artistic work.
Unit 48. One of the most demanding and, at the same time, inspiring aspects of translating for children is the potential for such creativity that arises from what a literary critic has called the childness of children's texts. The quality of being a child, dynamic, imaginative, experimental, interactive, and unstable.
The energy output from solar panels or wind power engines, where most investment happens before they begin producing, may need to be assessed differently when compared to most fossil fuel extraction technologies, where a large proportion of the energy output comes much sooner, and a larger relative proportion of inputs is applied during the extraction process and not up front.
According to many sociologists, the study of what our society calls art can only really progress if we drop the highly specific and ideologically loaded terminology of art, artworks, and artists, and replace these with the more neutral and less historically specific terms, cultural forms, cultural products, and cultural producers.
The consequence of scientism is that non-scientific approaches to reality, including all the arts, religion, and personal, emotional, and value-laden ways of encountering the world, may become labeled as merely subjective, and therefore of little account in terms of describing the way the world is.
A journey through the stacks of a real library has the possibility to be more fruitful than a trip through today's distributed virtual archives, because it seems difficult to use the available search engines to emulate efficiently the mixture of predictable and surprising discoveries that typically result from a physical shelf search of an extensive library collection.
Since photographs did such an excellent job of representing things as they existed in the world, painters were freed to look inward and represent things as they were in their imagination, rendering emotion in the color, volume, line, and spatial configurations native to the painter's art.
So slow and painful is the process of mastering a technique, whether of hand craftsmanship or art, so imbued are we with the need of education for the acquirement of knowledge, that we are taken aback by the realization that all around us are creatures carrying on the most elaborate technique, going through the most complicated procedures, and possessed of the surest knowledge without the possibility of teaching.
Investigations into the economics of information encompass a variety of categories, including the costs of information and its services, the effects of information on decision-making, the savings from effective information acquisition, the effects of information on productivity, and the effects of specific agencies such as corporate, technical, or medical libraries on the productivity of organizations.